Good evening, everyone who's in the audience and also panelists. Hi. Welcome to this evening's panel discussion on water architecture of Rajasthan, organized by Sahapedia. Before we move on, I would like to tell briefly about Sahapedia to our attendees. Sahapedia is an open online resource on the arts, cultures, and histories of India based on both curated and crowdsourced content. Saha, Sanskrit for together with, is an invitation to explore together the richness of the Indian cultural landscape. At Sahapedia, we appreciate the knowledge around each subject is complex and has many dimensions. And Sahapedia platform gives users many options for finding their preferred way around each of the subject. At Sahapedia, people can read articles, watch videos, listen to interviews, and browse image galleries. Users can also explore historic sites and natural spaces through virtual walks, timelines, and interactive maps. So today's panel is a part of the Roots of Rajasthan project partnered with the Royal Rajasthan Foundation, a social impact arm of Rajasthan Royals to document the cultural heritage of the state of Rajasthan. This evening's panel topic is water architecture of Rajasthan. The desert state of Rajasthan is well known for its water architecture. The land of sports is also a land of man-made water bodies, exemplifying a culture of valuing each drop of precious water. Today's panel will highlight the history, the importance, and restoration projects around the water architecture. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to this evening's panel. Our first panelist this evening is A. Mridul, an internationally awarded architect. He has a varied palette of projects in India and the US. His projects are an extension of heritage and contemporizing traditional practices to make them timeless, thus modern and futuristic. Mridul is passionate about the ancient water heritage of India. He believes and practices the idea of making India water positive by contemporizing the traditional water heritage through its regeneration, replication, and mainstreaming. He is currently officiating as chairman of the Rupayan Sansthan, a folklore institute founded by noted anthropologist Padma Bhushan Komal Kothari. He co-founded the Jodhpur Lore, an initiative to promote centuries-old traditional crafts of the region through workshops and training. Our second panelist of the evening is Dr. Vibhuti Sachdev. She is a qualified architect from SPA in Delhi, and she did her PhD in Vastu Vidya in 1996 from the University of London, and has worked as a conservation consultant, writer, and designer. She is interested in issues of negotiating modernity, urbanism, and the craft and cultural traditions. She has taught at the University of Sussex, written 4 books and several articles on the subjects of Jaipur, traditional knowledge systems, Indian cities, and Indian modernity. She has worked and written extensively on the city of Jaipur, focusing on its planning, architecture, and craft traditions. Since publishing these books, Dr. Sachdev has been a consultant on the restoration of the Jal Mahal in Jaipur and was the design curator for the artwork of its pavilions and the co-curator of the exhibition Painted Visions. Her latest book is on the festivals at the Jaipur Court. She is currently the Dean at Sushant School of Art and Architecture and Director, Architecture, Planning and Design Schools, Sushant University. And this evening's moderator is Sourabh Sengupta. He is the founder and member of the Dead River Project Foundation. Their mission is to spread awareness on water conservation, connect communities, and come up with collective solutions and create real-time immersive solutions in virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, along with 3D interactive application development for environment sector for future change makers that will benefit the world at large. He's a young entrepreneur with a large heart and a team in place to build a futuristic world with balances, technology, and environment. Welcome everyone for this evening's panel. I'm very excited about it. I will now give the floor to Mridul to start with his presentation. And meanwhile, the attendees, if you have any questions and any queries that you would like to ask the panelists, please drop it down in the Q&A box. Over to you, Mridul.
Yeah, hello. Is the screen visible? Okay. So good evening, everybody. My thanks to Sahapedia and Royal Rajasthan Foundation for inviting me to this panel discussion on perhaps the most extraordinary architecture of Rajasthan that is either subterranean or at sub-ground level, being a monsoon-driven state where the rainfall is meager and erratic. The genesis of water architecture stemmed from the indomitable will of the desert dwellers to live and survive through centuries in severely inclement environmental conditions. Rajasthan state has the lowest rainfall in India, especially in its desert region. The water bank of Rajasthan is entirely monsoon dependent, barring the Chambal River. There is no other perennial river and absolutely none in the Thar Desert. Yet it has thrived for ages. In fact, it was our ancestors' ingenuity of harnessing water in indigenous ways that created a huge repertoire of water heritage and made Rajasthan's desert the most populous of all the deserts of the world. In fact, we have the desert population is close to the entire population of Australia put together. The legacy of it's not moving. Please excuse me, it's not moving. What's happening? Okay. So the legacy of the water heritage of Rajasthan is supremely rich. Yes, as of today, it is largely dormant, yet it is highly resilient. The variety of water bodies in Rajasthan has been very diverse, from simple to ornate, be it for surface water collection or for accessing subterranean water. The variance of typologies and scales were determined by the geography, the geology, the catchments, and the volume of water that would rain in each locale. So you have Kadeen, you have Johar, you have Nadi, Tanka, and many more such ones to collect the surface water runoff. And then there are kuas, beris, kui, and many other kinds of wells to access water from the aquifers. These rainwater containments were created always with a sense of inclusiveness. Water was always a shared resource. It was allowed to optimally serve the flora, the fauna, and the people. And these water bodies were mostly built, maintained, and operated by communities. Even the catchments were common responsibility of the people. The connect between communities and water was direct and intimate. It manifested in making the water and water bodies celebratory and worship-worthy. The cultural perspective around these sacred water structures was sewn into the daily life of people as social and religious rituals, in a sense, as a hedge against their desecration. Water in Rajasthan had always commanded the deepest reverence, especially in the desert region, where its availability hinged on the caprice of nature. To water, man brought the best of his skills as offering in worship by constructing water buildings as temples to water, replete with intricate carvings and sculptures. The mesmerizing aqua structures built as ecosystems to access subterranean water or to harvest rainwater were an inherent part of the water heritage. Long before we had high-rise buildings, there were these inverted multi-storied buildings. A magnificent variant of draw wells is the stepped pond, Jalara in the local dialect. Jalara are of square geometry with their retaining walls ingeniously fashioned as an amazing cascade of short steps on three sides. To negotiate the rising and falling levels of water, the depth of these ponds varied with the varying levels of aquifers. These serve as community spaces for rituals, for bathing, for seating, and social gathering. Water collected in pots and vessels would be heavy, and the climbing of these short steps would facilitate comfortable and easy movement. Another variant of a draw well is step well called Bawdi in the local dialect. Bawdis are unidirectional and sink deep many stories into the earth. Bawdis were the more intimate socio-cultural buildings, especially for women, as fetching water fell in their domain. The architecture of the step wells was such that they would have underground pavilions on the structural frames and the chambers in the flanking walls where women would gather for social interaction in the cool privacy away from the gaze of men in scorching sun. For a few women, this was the only outing they had amid daily chores and domestic responsibilities. These water bodies dotted the entire landscape of the state. You would find them in villages, on trade routes, in towns and cities. The majority of the historic cities in India had extremely dense housing, and the desert cities especially were planned with hundreds of water bodies embedded in the dense settlement, serving as aqua parks and as lungs of the tightly packed neighborhoods, creating a picturesque setting. In an extremely hot and dry region, these water buildings provided respite from heat and dryness, transforming the ecology and microenvironment, making the place more livable. But the irony is that, like in most of India, Rajasthan, despite having a great wealth of ancient water structures, today stands water impoverished. Unfortunately, with the afflictions of changing times, the legacy of water heritage got lost in the din of lopsided development that is the bane of modern India. Changing lifestyles in urban areas and water-intensive crops instead of region-appropriate farming escalated demand for water, and the huge repertoire of traditional water bodies managed by communities with a participatory and a democratic approach was relegated in favor of a centralized, state-controlled modern water infrastructure. This, as a solely independent dispensation, has proven to be dismally insufficient in meeting the freshwater requirement of an increasing population. Paradoxically, the advancement of water technology, aiding water being sourced from off-site locations, from dams and remotely located rivers, instead of complementing, completely replaced the indigenous water systems, which with time resulting in impoverishing the state in fresh water. Post-independence, the state took over the ancient water bodies from the communities without accountability. So there were three C's, C as in alphabets, which have pushed these water buildings into dormancy and oblivion. The first C is callousness on part of the state, with which they have been abandoned and are now in a shambles, defunct and forgotten, no matter how beautiful they are. The second C is the state's complacence when these were desecrated and encroached upon. These were treated as dump yards, and many of these got appropriated while the government just looked away. And the third C is government's complicity in the destruction process by allotting mining leases in the catchment areas. Many of the catchments have been given away without a policy for conserving the natural water drains, and they are now destroyed, and many of them beyond salvage. What were once temples to water have become tombs of water, literally and figuratively. On the other hand, ironically, the unharnessed water gets converted into floods in the cities. Over 90% of rainfall in Rajasthan, as in the rest of India, is allowed to fritter away, and the total volume of water consumed in the urban areas is less than the sum of stormwater and wastewater put together. These facts are, though disheartening, yet ironically hope-inducing. The pluvial flooding clearly demonstrates that our towns and villages are large active catchments, and that there's a great potential for rebuilding the on-site water resources by harnessing the wasted rainwater from the local catchments. This is an inscribed stone pillar installed near almost all historic water bodies. It has sculptures of deities, which inculcates in the community an idea of sacredness to alert people that they're in a pious zone where they must exercise the deepest reverence. So in order to mitigate the water stress, the reverence for water that falls on the land upon which you live needs to be restored. The respect for local rains and the respect for indigenous water architecture has to be rebuilt. For the last 1 decade now, our architectural firm has been putting into practice the idea of contemporizing the traditional water architecture by way of its regeneration and iteration. The aim is to reactivate the ancient water bodies and embed them in post-colonial urban and rural fabric, the new ones, and also in future developments. And once these local on-site water bodies are active and thriving, integrate them with the mega water infrastructure to create a strong, sustainable network. As a first for regeneration of the water heritage, we have identified a huge number of ancient water bodies and are seeking support from philanthropists, community, and corporates to conserve and reactivate them. The picture shows one of the many such efforts. The 17th century step pond is among the first few ones that we have regenerated. The picture on the left shows it fraught with deep vegetation growth and structural damage. The one on the right is a picture after this was conserved and restored in July last year. The idea is to join these to the present network and supply the water to the neighborhood. So we have had support. The regeneration effort of ours was jointly funded by Miranda Museum Trust and the Inner Wheel Club of Jodhpur. Presently, we are simultaneously working on water mapping and regeneration of over 10 water bodies. Revived and returned to the community, these historic water buildings are becoming active socio-cultural spaces that would ensure their sustainability and upkeep. Their successful regeneration clearly proves that even after being in dormancy for over a century and being in a state of grave dilapidation, they have the potential to bounce back to life as water sources, community spaces, and as environmental building that will enhance the ecology of the place. Water bodies, old and new, are timeless. They have to be rejuvenated, innovated upon, and created from time to time so that heritage is continuously built with every new creation. From the time Rajasthan was primarily dependent on the on-site local water sources to now, the population has increased exponentially. Surely, reviving all the water bodies will hardly be sufficient for the present population. To keep the state water positive, it is imperative to iterate the water heritage by embedding new water bodies in colonies that have come up in the last century and also mandate new ones in future developments. It's necessary that we mandate them. This idea of iteration of the historic water architecture, the concept of building and expanding on-site water buildings, has been successfully realized in a housing township in Jodhpur by constructing a new stepwell, Birkha Bawri, in the year 2009. This project of ours is an initiative to restore the missing link between the ancient and the contemporary, reassuring the golden era of water harvesting structure. This massive subterranean stone stepwell for over 17.5 million liters of rainwater is about 750 feet long, an average of 30 feet wide. Each bay is about 46 feet long. This Bawri descends 5 stories below the ground. The construction of this stepwell is especially significant as it is built of locally available natural building material, built by local craftsmen to collect the natural resource of rainwater, harnessed by gravity, creating an eco-friendly structure celebrating stone and water architecture. We are not using any electricity over here. Only in drawing water we are using electricity. That also we are converting into solar energy. So it kind of becomes a zero energy project. As contemporary as it is traditional, Birkha Bawri has been designed as an inviting community space for people to gather, to celebrate, restoring the socio-cultural ethos of the intimate connect that the community had with the vernacular water buildings. True to the tradition, this stepwell has been developed to serve as a public space with a meandering promenade and a park along its walls. The before and after pictures of the township bear testimony to the environmental and ecological transformation such projects can effect from barren to lush green without the help of state resources, without taking water from the state, from government. The creation of the stepwell in the 21st century demonstrates that such indigenous water bodies are still viable architecturally and financially, and that it is possible to build and expand the water heritage of the country. In conclusion, I would say that to mitigate the water crisis and the environmental degradation, not only Rajasthan, but the entire country needs to regenerate its ancient water sources, develop new local on-site rainwater containment, and integrate them to complement the larger water infrastructure for developing a sustainable water portfolio and make India water positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mridul. Over to you now, Vibhuti.
Not sure.
I think you're on mute.
So I was asked to just do a rapid slide round of before and after pictures, but also make some general points about our relationship with water as a society, and and also the importance of Rajasthan in its expression response to water as as a land of scarcity of water. You get these beautiful expressions of water, whether it's a piyao or a ghat or a bauli or a kund or a talab or a jalmahal. So there are these various expressions of architectural nature, some not entirely architectural, which we are losing because our relationship with water is through a tap. It's no longer about our relationship with the origin of water, which was always culturally very important. Where does water come from? And so to address these lost typology, losing typologies, I think we were talking earlier that somehow we have to regenerate our connect with water as a society. So I'm just going to show quick pictures. This is a picture taken in 1950s of the Jal Mahal, and you can see that it's surrounded with hills. This was almost used as a site office by Savai Jai Singh in the 1750 when Jaipur was under construction. So he was living in Amer Fort, which was his ancestral home, and he started constructing Jaipur in 1729, and he would stay here, and he had had constructed this pleasure pavilion, if you like, surrounded by. This is entirely a man-made lake. So it's an outcrop of rock, which around which the lake has been dug out, and the Jal Mahal is built around this outcrop. And so it's not as deep as it looks. It's only one floor, one room width deep, and in the center there is this outcrop of rock over which is this garden. So what you see, of course, is none of that beauty, but a lake full of filth. If I can go to my next slide. Yeah, this is in the 1980s when there was some attempt at painting it, planting some trees, but not very successful. Again, not very lasting, at least. What happened was that all the water channels from the surrounding hills were interrupted because of the unauthorized construction or authorized construction. Depends on which side of authority you are, and all the which used to feed the lake, they were blocked, and all the water and the sewage was being dumped in this lake from Jaipur. So it basically became a sewage dump for the city, and none of that beauty really is visible. And you can see here again in the 1980s, 90s. Again, you can see how this is sewage basically, and all the sewage of the city being dumped in the lake, and none of the rainwater being able to come to the lake to replenish it. This is when in 2006 we were asked, I was part of the restoration team because of my expertise on Vasavi, and also I had worked very closely with craftsmen to understand their vocabulary and working process that I was involved amongst water restoration people, other conservation architects, and we had actually literally waded through this human waste, and we had just gone 200 meters into the sewage, and we thought we're really going to fall ill. There's no way. There was a methane bubbling out of this water, and then our eyes pinned on this beautiful building we kind of straddled on, and we didn't look down because, you know, that was really, really dismal view of, you know, all this sewage. And very soon our, you know, passion for restoring it, and a wonderful enlightened client who, Mr. Kutari, who, this was a private-public partnership, and you know, his support and his enlightened view, and also, you know, the kind of freedom he gave us, his team, to kind of, you know, do our best, and we were all very passionate and enlightened and charged up to restore this building. Very soon we, you know, put the scaffolding, called the Mistries, and, you know, Jaipur is a place, as there are, you know, other places in India which abound with craftsmen who know their skill. You know, there is an abundance of people who know how to do araish, how to do chunam, how to make beautiful buildings. So we gathered all of them and we started the work in 2004, 2005. And we got the, you know, the best craftsmen to come and work with us. And we started reconstructing the building, because there were, you know, plenty of clues within the building itself. And I had already worked on the vocabulary of Jaipur, on its building process, its design process. So I was familiar with, you know, the motifs, the look of the 1750s to 1800s to 1900s, how it changed, how it kind of evolved. So we were very queued up with the vocabulary. So and so were the craftsmen, you know. So it was more of a dialogue we had with craftsmen when we began the work of reconstruction. So it is really amazing how we did not use any drawings to reconstruct. It was a vocabulary of negotiating which motif will go, how big it will be. We drew on the stone. We, you know, saw it being carved together on the stone. And of course, we had to do the drawing process as a documentation post the event to say, you know, this is how we planned it. But it was, that's what happens, you know, when you have a shared knowledge system and you can negotiate the design process in a conversation, and you don't need this interface of a contractual drawing, which you know, is which then, you know, depends falsely on accuracy, and the whole process is very different. And we got, this is how it looked when we went in, of course, you know, lovingly calligraphied by romantic lovers saying they love so-and-so. And this is, you know, this is the state of most of our monuments, which are neglected. And of course, the layers of plaster that, you know, in the name of restoration or, you know, upkeep or maintenance that went on meant that it had hidden a lot of things, you know, embellishment that we gradually started to discover. And as we peeled off the layer, and this is one of our prized craftsman, and you know, why I'm showing this slide is to just look at his focus and his energy and his, you know, so connected he is with the line he's drawing. And this really energized us throughout the process, that, you know, this was for the craftsmen. When you see them work, it's for them, it's an evolution for themselves. It's something of a higher order than just, you know, doing the araish work. And we had, and this is what is the same shot as before. And some of the decisions we took, that, you know, when we removed the layers of chunam that were on the column, we found this, you know, beautiful marble layer underneath. And so we decided we'll keep the marble. And so, of course, a little bit of our modern sensibility also kicked in, you know, so it looks good, white on white and minimalist. And also not very intrusive in terms of the number of layers we would want to put on. So, you know, the lower black and white panels are all araish panels, you know, keeping in with the vocabulary of the Jal Mahal. And sorry, I skipped this slide to show another craftsman we worked on. And this is what it looked like in 2010. We dredged the lake, we opened the channel from the hills. This is sort of an eco-restoration project. And the lovely boat you see, we saw a lot of miniature drawings of the 18th century. So there are lots of paintings, miniature paintings, which have these peacock-headed and elephant-headed boat. And we had great fun, getting it made and carved in these various animal heads, and reconstructed the facade, because the chal was already there. The rhythm of the motifs were already there. There were remnants of the motifs which showed us that this is what the chal is, and you have to go with the same lay and motif, the patterning. So there were enough clues. And on the roof, the outcrop which holds the garden, we saw that there were these chhatris and tibaris, which obviously suggested a charbagh sort of formulation, and worked on the garden with Mitch Kreitz, who got in a lot of craftsmen as well, and we recreated the garden on a charbagh style with an octagonal pavilion in the middle, and dug out all these motifs from. This was from Swinton Jacobs' architectural portfolio. We reconstructed it in marble, using it as a flower bed. And the railing that you see around the octagonal pavilion was from City Palace, Jaipur. So we were very conscious of the date of the motif and where it's coming from, the origin of the motif and our intervention, so that it can be made beautiful again. And similarly, the ceilings and painting work of the Tibaris. This we drew from City Palace again, which is of the similar date, and in Chandra Mahal, and the ceilings have the same motif. So we worked with the craftsmen, and they did this amazing work in the pavilion. And this is what it looked like. When it's all done, it had very fine gold work. We drew all this later on, but we worked it out in a conversation. What is the motif? How is the leher going to go, and what is the bail, and how are we going to turn the corner was an interesting long conversation, because the idea of resolved design, if the design is fudged, the corners will not match. So how you turn the corner is very crucial for design resolution. So this is one of the Tibaris, and this is what it looks like at night. We also had Dhruv Jyoti Ghosh, who worked on Sydney Opera House in Australia, another architect who did the lighting for us. Again, a very passionate, lighting, very sensitive to old structures and how it's sort of lit from under the water, and we made sure that everything is diffused and not focused, so that it doesn't harm the fabric, the building patina in any way. And this is one of my favorite chhatris. It's very Tibaris. It's very interesting that what we did. I worked out with the craftsmen, because I curated all this artwork on all the Tibaris, and what I worked out with the craftsmen, I said, let's do a ras on the roof, and we did this Ras Leela on the roof, and the motifs you see in the middle are the motifs in the garden. So they are a reference to the Chameli Bagh that we did, and we painted fruit trees with fruits, and so it turned out to be very, very loud green, as opposed to very restrained other Tibari. And this was very popular with the craftsmen. And then on the sides, you see the monuments, drawings of the monuments, which you can see from the arch. So it was very referential. We did a very referential design, that you paint what you can see, and you see the City Palace. You paint the City Palace. You see the Jantar Mantar from one side. This is where Jantar Mantar is, so we painted the Jantar Mantar on, and all done in the local style. So it was great fun. And we also, the green panels closer to the ground are all Araish. So it's a very Araish is a very impervious, hard coating, and actually it's lime-based coating, which over time ages so beautifully that it becomes one with the stone. And the advantage of Araish is it can only be done on bad stone. It can only be done on porous sandstone. So, and you cover it and it looks, sometimes therefore it is called poor man's marble, because, you know, it looks very glossy and almost marble-like when it's white. But it's very, very hard. It's very hard and long-lasting as a finish. So this is our wonderful Chameli Bagh on top. When you can see the Tibari is all lit up, and there is water circulation as well, and there is a chadar that goes from below. And we'd imagined, you know, all these fantastic classical performances happening on this pavilion, and we'll have seminars, and we'll have really interesting dance performances. So all that, you know, with our heads, we're imagining that this is how this place will come alive for the residents of Jaipur. And we were very keen that, you know, this should make sense for the community. First and foremost, this should be of value to people who live in Jaipur. Only then it will succeed. So this can't be, you know, another tourist spot where you take a boat ride around and then go home and say, oh, I saw Jalmar. This is not what it was for. It was for, you know, a living, active place. And so the exhibition we designed was totally maintenance free. And this is another view of the Chameli Bagh and the Tibaris, where you saw the artwork on the right pavilion is the green Ras Tibari. And this is the before picture of the garden and the before picture of the sewage, as if we need more. And this is our, you know, restored Jal Mahal with clean water, and the lake had been dredged, so all the sewage was cleared out and dumped on actually an adjacent site where they started growing vegetables on, which I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but you know, it was all cleared, and the rainwater, you know, every monsoon it gets filled up. It's never been dry since we completed in 2012. It took us 10 years. It took us 10 years, but you know, worth it, you know, and the water is always full, and the channels feed the water, and you know, and the building is low maintenance, so it's there. And the bird species, we had 57 new bird species which nested in and around Jal Mahal, and a lot of migrant birds. So we had flamingos, Siberian flamingos who come during the winter, and a lot of fish as well. So this place is you know, bustling with life and with people as well. This is 2010, and you know, this has become an important marker for tourists, and the access to the monument is not open yet, but you know, people throng to this place, and it's beautiful to look at. I hope soon we will be able to go and visit the building and be there. At the moment, the entry is restricted. And this is a typically Rajasthani moment. And it's very popular with local people who come here, have golgappas, chat in the evening, take a walk, and I think that's my last slide.
Brilliant and amazing, both of you. I mean, honestly, if you ask me, I was completely taken aback, and I was in Rajasthan traveling and watching the amazing work you guys have showed us. And yeah, I mean, I got a lot of questions, and I have a lot of questions to ask. So can we have Mridul sir? I don't see him.
Here I am.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, so you guys have shown us a lot of things, and you know, that has triggered a lot of questions and a lot of responses from people as well as from me. Now, straight away, I would like to ask Mridul sir, we have seen the journey, we have seen the state of water structure restoration in Rajasthan through the slides that you have shown. Now tell us something that's the most important and vital part of it. How is it being funded? I mean, is it something that uh, government supports or non-government organizations, a community? How does it work, sir? Such a huge work.
So it's on many fronts that it happens. Taking government support financially is not very good for these projects because they have a certain system going through tenders and all. And it's a very specialized job because when we do this, we take care that as much as possible, we don't change the material and we use original material, we use lime, we use only stone. So whereas they often have a problem in doing this. So what we have been doing is that we've asked the government to give it to some of the NGOs, some of the organizations in adoption. And we tell them that we don't need money from you. And we start raising money because people have become conscious and people want to do this work. We raise money from NGOs, we raise money from corporates. Then, the Jodhpur Maharaja, he has been funding he has funded 2, 3 projects already, and he has committed that he will be funding a few every year. So that's another source. Then there are certain organizations like Inner Wheel Club and many other clubs. I mean, however much they can give, because you see, you have conservation work for all ranges. So you have something which is as small as 50,000, you have as big as maybe a few crores. So depending on who wants to do what, so we get that funding. But we, as far as we are concerned, we keep funding clear of government.
Okay, okay.
And also at the local level, because time was short, I couldn't show some of the slides, but there are some Bawris which the community has taken up. They have given just as a Shramdan, labor and love. And they've cleaned up tons and tons of filth and garbage from there and restored it. And they're using it as a social space. Every Kartik Purnima, they have a function there. I mean, they must be having for other things also, but they light up thousands and thousands of diyas over there. So that connected is there. It is returning. Yeah.
Okay. Vibhuti ma'am, you just mentioned the funder and his willingness to restore a monument of that structure and that heritage. What about the community, local community, apart from a certain segment coming in support of the restoration part? How has been the local community of Jaipur? Was there any involvement of their, maybe the youths, the kids, or the college-going people? How has been the response from their end? I mean, if you can just highlight us.
Yeah, so we were always, we reached out to community at all decision levels. We used to have awareness programs that this is what we are doing in Jal Mahal, this is. So with structures like this, everybody's childhood memories are attached to structures like this,
Right.
And whether there's a Baoli and, in Bachapur Baoli, when we were doing our campaign and awareness program, people talked about how they used to have a bath in the Baoli and how, whenever they used to come to their nani house, they used to go for a bath. So these are special memories that will only last for another generation before, we lose. But I think it is important to revisit, what we can restore and how, because, there are a lot of B-grade monuments that should be allowed to be used, and whether it's adaptive reuse, you make it into schools, because use is the only thing that will keep these buildings alive. Just cordoning of the building and visiting it and, saying, oh, kitna acha tha, and then coming back and forgetting about it is not going to give it life. And as people who use architecture, if you lock up your apartment for a month, you come back and it's filthy. And imagine buildings that are locked up for 200, 300 years, obviously they're going to be filthy. So use is the best maintainer of buildings. So I think what I'm saying is that there are some iconic buildings, of course, which should be, there are World Heritage sites and they should be, honored the way, people around the world want to honor them. But there are lots of B-grade buildings which are not as iconic, but they are marvelous. They're wonderful, thick walls, good material, great ceiling height. They should be made into art galleries, restaurants, banks, schools. And, we should loosen up our, this thing about, you can't use it for a modern function. We have to open up our imagination a bit more as to how we want to contemporize heritage, whether it's water architecture or, Havelis, and, there are lots of...
So do we have any mapping sort of category A, category B, category C?
Yeah.
And has that been updated to the authorities that, these kind of plans can be executed to retain the heritage or maintain the lost, gift?
Yeah, there are buildings that come under ASI and there are buildings that come under Development Authority.
Mm.
So they have different norms. They have different, different ways of, approaching them. The other thing I would want to say is that, the heritage buildings like these are markers of our landscape. These also tell you how water flows. Why do our roads, and Mridul showed that very painful again. Why do our roads flood? Because we've closed the flow of water. The water would naturally go to the Baoli or to Jalmail or to, so these are markers. And can you imagine many of our master plans don't have a contour on the land? And, every land is contoured. No land is flat. And unless we can document our land the way it is, how do we think that we won't have problems? Of course we will have problems.
So has the urban planner misjudged the things because, has they not kept the history in mind in planning the town of modern days?
So of course, to a modern developer, if you want to make a luxury housing scheme and you have this little chhatri in your and people like Mridul and I will like go there and say, how dare you pull it down? This is old structure. You must save it. You must build housing around it and not pull it down. So, it quickly vanishes because it's a problem and it devalues the land. He's going to lose out a whole housing block for the sake of a, 13th century chhatri. So there is a lot of short-termism. There's a lot of, policies. I think things are changing though. I think people are getting more aware to be positive about it because, MCG Gurgaon is doing amazing work. We've just begun our work on Sadar Bazaar and, Chandni Chowk. There are lots of nice things, good things that are happening through the municipal corporation, which is a huge positive. I think things are changing.
Mridul sir, your Jodhpur initiative, the Jodhpur lore, how has the audience reacted to it when you take people to water trails or when you narrate the stories? Have they come back to you stating that we wish to be there with you in the journey in coming years to come, or has there been any input from the audience per se to contribute in terms of activism or coming by you? Because we all need support. You guys are doing amazing work single-handedly, but having somebody, some community or some kind of audience coming and saying, boss, okay, you guys are doing this, let's stand by you and we also take some kind of share in the effort that you guys are putting in. So how has that been into it practice?
So there are two aspects to it. One is people who volunteer and come and take these, what has come to be known as water trails. So, we venture into water trails and with the intent that we will kind of galvanize people and make them conscious towards this, and they will contribute. The other is that we go to people. Like for instance, these projects that we have been doing, we go to people, we go to corporates, and we tell them, you come and visit and start funding us. And if we manage to get them interested, then they do give money. Although I did say that government had a lot of apathy, but to their credit, I must also say that times have changed, and even if we are taking things in adoption and we are asking them not to give money, at least they're doing that. Earlier, they won't even have been doing that. But so that contribution itself is very great. It doesn't always have to be financial contribution because there are other problems taking financial contribution from the government. But yes, these people who come, so we prepare a report, we prepare a trail, we take them there, we show them the place, and a lot of people who are doing work in water sector, a lot of corporates who are doing work in water sector. So we are trying to get them interested in it, yes.
Because in the comment section, a lot of people says that, we wish to be part of it. How can we reach out to you guys? What are the plan? Like, how can we contribute? So what is the message to them?
Oh, wow. That's very nice. So, well, they're welcome. And just I said that, we have things of all scales. Whoever wants to contribute will be very nice. And I mean, either through Sahapedia or they can mail to us. We'll be very happy. That's what we are looking for.
So now I'm picking up a couple of questions from the Q&A that people have raised. So there's one question: how many Boweries are there mapped? This is to Mridul sir. So is there any counting of the mapping of the Boweries in Rajasthan?
Well, that's a looking for a needle in a haystack. But there are so many Boweries. I live in the Thar Desert. I am in Jodhpur, and we are doing a lot of work over here in water bodies. But every other day we discover there's a new Bowery. Every other day we discover that there's a Bowery which has been closed, which has been encroached upon. And when we started work, we thought there would be just a few Boweries. In Jodhpur alone, there are about over 300 water bodies, big and small. So you can imagine what the state must be in Rajasthan. But no single body can do that. There are a lot of educational institutions there, like Vibhutis and all, they would be interested. So mapping can be done, and a lot of people have to get together to do this mapping. They have to select areas and do it. So presently there's no data. And also there's no data because government has never been interested in this. Otherwise they would have collected data, nor is ASI interested in this. These water structures are so important, but they haven't been accorded the right importance from these authorities.
I see. Vibhuti ma'am, there's a question. How is the sewage or other wastewater prevented to enter the steep wells during rainfall, or for that matter in Jal Mahal?
So an extra sewage pipe was laid, and it was sort of to a recycling unit. We had to kind of ask the government to construct that, and the whole dump was diverted from the lake to an adjacent plot of land. It was used for recycling it, so it's no longer being dumped.
Okay. Mridul sir, there's one question: can the existing Boweries within the city be restored back to the original use of these Boweries, where they are just not tourist spots? And is there any possible way where the Boweries effectively tackle the underground water pipe system like the Johars in rural area?
So this is precisely what we have done. We've restored them not only for the aesthetic value, we've restored them so that the water can be put to use. We are facing a lot of water crisis. In fact, new colonies come up and government doesn't have water to supply. So while they are sanctioning new colonies, they cannot provide the infrastructure or the water that they have because they've got very limited water. So these Boweries, which we are restoring, and there's a lot of water lying there, and there's water which gets recharged. So that's the water which comes up. So even what we have done already, we're using that water. We're using it everywhere. And socials, of course, you don't have a direct engagement with these water bodies. Earlier, you would go and fetch water. Now you don't have to do that. So it's piped water supply. So you're drawing water from it and supplying it to people. So it is being used that way, yeah.
Now there is one question from Germany. Is there a before and after comparison in form of a survey for social life and local economy impacted due to heritage rejuvenation? So this is for both. I mean, anyone can start. And I think it's a very important question.
So, okay. So as far as economy is concerned, you see, our first priority is water. We don't have enough of water. So, I mean, water we need for survival, number one. And when you start talking about these rural water bodies, they have been abandoned. In fact, there are two generations which have grown up without even knowing that there were these, ancient water bodies where they would collect the runoff and they would, fend for themselves. They would have water for their fields, like, you have Khadeen and you have all these water bodies. So now if you start reviving that, naturally the economy gets revived because they don't have enough water. No matter how much water you are importing from Punjab rivers or from other dams, you will never have enough. So naturally you have a direct bearing on economies over there. And as far as cities are concerned, here, even if we give water for drinking purposes, that's more than enough because we don't have enough water. And if you go to some of the smaller towns, the quality of water that they're drinking, I mean, you wouldn't even want to look at it. So, because firstly, our groundwater has gone down. There's so much extraction without any effort to recharge. That is one. The other is whatever is left, is your non-drinkable water.
Right.
So if we start recharging and collecting this water, of course, you start living economy for farms and agriculture, of course, comes into play. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ma'am, your take on this?
Yeah, I think the way we measure success is a very false scale. Everything cannot be measured in terms of economics, whether, people have been able to earn some money. I mean, what about, for example, festivals we have Diwali, and every time there is a festival, there is a heightened state of society, fantastic food is produced, fantastic clothes are worn, songs are sung. Also, all this intangible heritage that revolves around a traditional practice
Right.
cannot be measured directly in terms of how much money you get from the tourist industry. And of course, to keep alive continuing traditions, we are a land of continuing traditions where, people have ancient memories. So, through these buildings, through these structures, through water, these memories are alive. And it is worth even just for that to give employment to craftsmen, for example, to continue their craft skill, to make festivals happen there. Mridul showed a wonderful slide of, Bauli being used as an amphitheater. There are lots of new things that you can put to use to these buildings. And of course, in terms of tourism also, they are successful because they're pretty to look at, people will have a pleasant experience, but that's a very small benefit. I mean, you're talking about an ancient civilization, which is at risk here, so to continue these things, to save them, to let the traditions keep going, to let the intangible heritage keep going is so important that, also, we should have different scales for measuring success. If you want to measure success, let's not measure it in terms of how much money is in the wallet. I think that's not, that, the current times have shown that that's not a measure of success. So the richest man also has coronavirus and the poor man also has coronavirus. So let's get a counter right first.
Right. There's one more very important question. Is there any specific cultural inspiration does these structures have? Do they reflect the regional architecture pertaining to geography, climate?
So there always will be. I mean, you can never separate one from the other. So, I mean, in terms of building material, you go to different locales, you go to different regions, the material is going to change. Then, depending on the need, the geography, the contours, you decide what kind of water body you will have over there. So what you have in one place cannot necessarily apply to the other place. For instance, if you have Khadim, and if water is filled, say, up to 2 feet, 3 feet level, then at that time you can grow those crops which require more water. As the water recedes, then you start doing something which requires less water,
Right.
So even this would change. And of course, the styles would change. You come to Jodhpur, you have a different style. You go to Shekhawati, you have different style. Because within Rajasthan, you have got so many regions, Vadoti, Godwad, and all these places. I mean, I've done a survey of Baudis in Udaipur. They're so different from what we have in Jodhpur. They're so different from what they have in, Shekhawati. Essentially, they are the same, but the styles are different. The materials are different.
Okay. So, question number, I have lost the order. My question here is, once this COVID pandemic goes away, what are the steps? What are the upcoming projects that you guys are involved in, and how do you see the water restoration scenario going from here to the next level in creating a proper positiveness around the water restoration part in India?
To Vibhuti, to me.
You must. Okay, so there are a lot of things that we are doing as a school. We are, using Gurgaon as a learning city, as a living lab. So we do a Heritage Watch Day. So one of the things we do is, create awareness about water structures in Gurgaon, and we've got classic examples of flooded highways. To kind of every monsoon, roads flood. So it's great for us because then we can tell, see, look what you've done. we're working a lot with school children as well. We make paper toys with them, and we get, we do a lot of awareness there, and we also use a lot of tactical methods. For example, we were talking, the other day when we were doing a dry run, that people throw rubbish only where there is existing rubbish. People do not throw rubbish on a clean ground. So, what we've done is, after we clean the area, we make a rangoli, light few lamps. People are going to throw rubbish on lamps. This culturally does not happen. So even our, lovely mayor came, and she lit a lamp there, and nobody throws rubbish anymore. Or parks a car. You can't park a car on a rangoli with lamps on it. So there are, culturally, I think those values are still there, and I think we can do a lot with rekindling that, these old notions of what is water to us, what is water to life, how does it flow, how is it held, how is it sourced from under the ground, what does it do? I mean, when you're sourcing water from the ground, you're tapping into a vein. It's almost like, you're drawing water, drawing blood from the earth. Right. And that's a very sacred ritual. So to be mindful of water is very important, and we do a lot of awareness campaigns. We will continue to do that, make a lot of noise, and for all the wrongdoings.
So the idea of restoration does not stop at restoring traditional ancient buildings per se. It is also the restoration of the very concept of saving water, conserving water. And in that vein, what we are doing is we are not only conserving old water bodies, we are making new ones also. I mean, they will be in style different, in materials different. For instance, I showed you one, which is a very successful project, and we are doing 2 more water bodies right now. So the idea is to conserve the very concept of water harvesting. Unless you have these at the local levels, and you just depend on the off-site sources, it will never suffice. Some days, supposing it doesn't rain in a place from where my water comes, from that dam, then I don't have water. So to back it up, I need local support. And I have so much water. I'll tell you that barely 7 to 8% of water is what is being conserved in India.
Okay.
Yeah. So of all the precipitation that we have, barely 7 to 8%. If you start harvesting water, as we used to in the earlier days, India is definitely going to be water positive. And that's the reason why we not only have to restore the old ones, we have to make new ones and restore the concept of, making water bodies.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. I mean, Saurabh and I were discussing just before we start, concept of, the descent of Ganges, started out as rain. And the rainwater is harvested in the matted hair of Shiva, and then she becomes a river. Yeah. So the rainwater becomes a river, and this is a very powerful imagery in the descent of Ganga in Mamalpuram, the relief, and we have some very powerful concepts of how the water flows and how it's held, and it's those we must source those.
One must not forget that, of course, India has maybe bountiful of rivers, but essentially, India is monsoon dependent because rivers flow only at a certain place, whereas monsoon covers the entire country.
I have one pan-India question. We have to move forward from Rajasthan. So one question I would request panel to answer. You just said, Mridul sir, that India can be water positive. But to become water positive, there are various steps that needs to be taken into account. And all those water restoration has to happen. Then only, or a practice of, practicing rainwater harvesting has to be inculcated into our system, maybe in our life. So how do you see Indian condition, by when can we get into a water positive, phase? Because I understand it's a long-term thing. It cannot happen in over 1 season or 2 seasons. But do you see a positive attempt made by agencies or the government policies in that term?
Oh, definitely. You start watching what is happening, whether it is in Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh. In fact, I forget the name, but there's somebody in Madhya Pradesh who कहते हैं पानी की खेती कर रहे हैं. You know, they had barren fields, they had no water, and just one person started digging, and they started collecting water, and now people are replicating that. So it's happening all over. People are, you know, waking up to this whole idea of conserving local water. So there's a lot of hope. It's happening, yeah.
So they're the local people on their own doing these things, or being helped by the government bodies and policymakers?
I don't know much about policymakers because my experience with policymakers, as Vibhuti had also pointed out in making master plan and all, they often slip. You know, they don't respect the gradients. And frankly speaking, they're too busy with the mega infrastructures. However, within government, there are individuals who are supporting this. And if that person is in a position of power, he definitely makes a difference. Unfortunately, the bureaucracy in India is such that by the time a person gets hold of it, he gets transferred. And that's actually a very big problem.
The bottleneck is bureaucracy, but then bottom line also is, if community comes closer and they come in support and create a system where rather than interference of the government or supply of funds from the government, the local community come together and build some structure, or initiate these kind of water harvesting technology or water harvesting techniques. I think then it's a positive sign. India can, you know, become water positive in years to come.
Sometimes lending a helping hand actually means that don't interfere. If the community is doing some work, let it happen, you know. And I think ultimately, see, traditionally also it was community which was doing all these water bodies. And even now, they will be doing this water bodies. Yeah. The governments can support them, yes. Government can give them land, and government can maybe arrange some money for them. But ultimately, communities will have to take the lead.
I think also, you know, the change is happening quite rapidly now because people are more aware of what they're using to wash their utensils, you know, what kind of detergent they're using, what are they dumping in the ground, which feeds the water again. And I think what is happening is, you know, we see that, you know, soon there'll be like care ecosystems that will develop. So because of, you know, this corona contagion happening, care ecosystems where, you know, people look after their resources within a community. So then if somebody is polluting their water, the community will not let them. And if somebody is polluting air, they won't let them. If, you know, if their food or, you know, crop is going crazy because of, you know, fertilizers, they will make a noise. So I think these communities will become much more like a care ecosystems to replace the traditional communities that were there, which went on for generations and through lineage. Now, you know, people, because of a lot of migration, you know, these maybe the new type of human community will grow, which has its own well and has its own boundary and a beautiful structure. And, you know, we live in hope. There is a lot of hope.
Great. There is one question again I need to ask. Is there a separate discourse on what water heritage means to lower caste? I understand that not all had the access to the more elaborate structures that typically get selected for conservation today. I mean, let's get the first part. Is there anything that can be highlighted? Is there any separate discourse on what water heritage means for lower caste in today's time?
I think it's still rampant in some parts of the society. This discrimination between castes and also gender discrimination. Women during, you know, menstruating, women can't go and draw water from the well or visit temples. So there is still discrimination, but you know, I hope that the pandemic levels the society in that regard, because it's a great leveler, because Corona is not looking at caste. So or and we move towards a more humane society with human values. But there is, I'm afraid, yeah, there is still a lot of discrimination.
Mridul sir, your take on that?
You live in Jodhpur, so you'll know.
Yeah.
Closer to home.
See, if you see the traditional buildings, and in fact water buildings, you'll see that the more elaborate ones, the more aesthetically heightened ones have been done by maybe the rich people or the upper community. And if you go to wells which you look very simple, or the housing of the well which is very simple, so it's of a different caste altogether. But when it comes to conservation, because you see, whether it was done by them or by these people, by the other caste, they have all been abandoned. So as far as we are concerned, these are abandoned buildings which have to be taken up. And as far as use of water is concerned, now see the difference. Earlier you would go to fetch water, so there would be a caste issue that who's going. Now the water is being provided to you; it's being tapped to home. So basically, the use of that water body, at least in the urban areas, is quite different. So that is something which is not going to matter in some of the water bodies. But yet, in the rural areas, in some of the parts of the country, where people continue to draw from these traditional water bodies and which are, public water bodies, there this caste is still very pronounced, very accentuated.
And also, there is a lot of territoriality attached to water. Who owns the well, and who owns this river? I mean, we see it in the States as well. Refusing to share water with each other. So it's very territorial also, that owning water that flows across knows no boundaries, and yet is being owned.
Yeah. So there's one. I mean, I am not very sure about it, but what I know about water, and everybody should read and be aware of it, is that water is only. I mean, a water body can be a property, but water is a state property because you're not producing water, and that is something which people must learn and know about, so that their claims become right.
And but those are in the rule books, not on ground.
No, but awareness has to come about. If it comes, I mean, even if 10 people become aware, 5 might succeed in getting.
And also, I mean, how do you stop? It's very easy for us to say, is there discrimination? Look at our own houses. If a person who's working for you, does the whatever cleaning of the house, will you have a separate glass of water for that person? Will you give a glass of water to that person using your own glass? There are households which keep separate buttons, and they might say, this is because of hygiene, but I'm not entirely sure that it is due to hygiene, that we use a different, have this kind of discrimination. So it starts from home really, and it, how we, and look, I mean, I don't need to repeat it again, but look at the way the so-called migrant laborers, how they had to move from one place to another because, whole building industry is slowed down. And why have, I mean, that's discrimination by the building industry. Why won't we be able to look after them? And they're not coming back, of course, and which is fine. But, there are people who are being called migrants in their own country is something discriminatory, I feel. I mean, why should somebody who lives and works in a place, everybody is a migrant for that matter.
Yeah. I think it's ingrained in the system within our own self that needs to be cleaned up. Then only we can talk of, lower caste and upper caste and all those bifurcations of the society. Yeah. I think let's open up it for the people. If they have any further questions, Sindhuri, if you can ask people to question us.
Questions from the people.
Yeah, I mean, any further question additional to what we have discussed and taken up?
Shiraz,
you can take a look at the Q&A box.
I have taken up most of the questions, the ones that really, there is one question. Good evening. I want to ask that in the past, this water architecture were of great significance and had cultural value and had great stories behind them. Is that scenario still present among people?
All water bodies have great stories behind them. And that in itself is a very interesting thing to document. I don't think there'll be any water body without a story, even if it's a simple well, how people collected around it, because no water body was alone. It was never just an infrastructure, you know. So even a simple well, you would always have a tree next to it. You will have people sitting over there. In earlier times, you did not have any formal drawing rooms. So all social interaction used to happen outside the house, around water bodies, under the trees and all. And all would have very good. I mean, it's a very, very interesting thing to document here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that because I think all of us have water stories and we need to be more mindful and aware of our water stories. You know, in our families, you know, there'll be, you know, when we go to Ganga, we bring a bottle of water and then we put it in the bucket and, you know, and then it becomes Ganga. That's a story, you know. So our daily day-to-day life is full of water stories and it somehow has to be connected to the origin. I think that connection has been lost and we need to reconnect to architecture, to, you know, these typologies, to for example, Piau, the idea of Piau was so beautiful, you know, that you have a person giving, and it was regarded as something, you know, beneficial for anybody to do, that, you know, you have a person serving water and under a tree, and, you know, where people will rest and you're getting cool chilled water and from an earthen pot, and to replace that of course gives employment, also gives, you know, wonderful resting place for the traveler. To replace that with some RO machine, you know, is so unimaginative. I mean, we've got so many typologies that just need of course, they need modernizing, contemporizing, but, you know, don't just follow technology just for the sake of it. You know, see how it can be applied and how few things are worth continuing because they made sense. That's
right. And that's also answer to the question that says that, you know, are traditional architectural techniques and designs more sustainable? How can we go back to them? So what do you think? Is there a way of going back to the traditional technology that was there prevalent?
Yes, of course. I mean, it depends. You know, for instance, I showed you two examples. One where we were doing the restoration work. So we used all traditional technologies, you know, and we did not use a speck of cement in that because of the carbon footprint that cement leaves behind. But when you do a new one, then it depends on how you're designing it. You would use contemporary material. Of course, in contemporary material also. For instance, when I did this Brikha Baudi, we made sure that we don't use even you know, the fraction of a volume of RCC. There's no RCC that we've used over there. We've used local material because I know that stone is more sustainable. Even after 100 years, if it comes out, it can be used. Concrete cannot be reused. You know? So it has a very, very, very long life cycle. So we try and use more and more of these sustainable materials. I mean,
I have a slightly different view about that, Mridul, if I may, because I think using technology and being a purist is one view. Because I give you an example. In Jal Mahal, there's a ramp, and so with no disabled access. So how do you imagine people who are unable to walk, elderly, pregnant women, or disabled? You won't take them on a palki, which was what was done in the past. But so we asked for a lift. And, why shouldn't a lift be made available to people who can't climb the very steep steps? Because these old buildings have very steep steps. I mean, use technology where you have to can, and it frees you, and it democratizes your access. I think by all means one should use technology in that regard.
So I don't know if you people have ever visited the Miranda Museum in Jodhpur. You have. So there's an elevator over there. I don't know if you've taken that elevator.
Yes.
So that was a project done by us in 1991. And it's a monument. It's an old building, but a lift had to be put there. But we did it in a manner that you don't see it from outside. It quietly sits into the whole thing. It does not, conflict with the monumentality of the building. And I mean, it was such an interesting thing that normally you would build from bottom upwards. There, like a well, we started digging from top. There was a huge platform, 125 feet high. We dug it like you would dig a well. And then we just raised the lift inside. The only new structure that you see outside is the lift well. And those days, we did not have MRLs and all that. So that's the height that we have achieved. So, but we have used the same stone, we have used match the colors and all. So, I mean, what you're doing, I mean, one does that. But in doing that, what is it that you're doing? How you're designing? What kind of material you use? In fact, this is a project which has been, awarded by UNESCO. And we got a UNESCO citation because of this project, the way it has been done.
So, Vibhuti ma'am, tell me something. While you were working on that Jal Mahal project, so are people residing around these structures willfully support in the restoration work, or you went ahead and found the artisans and educated them, or you figured out whether they were educated enough to be part of the restoration team? How was there any apprehension when you working with the local artisans and those people? Or they were far more superior and understandable in their art? How was your experience on that part?
No, I think what is important in such public projects is to have communication with the community that lives around and also are a stakeholder in their upkeep. Also, it's their past, it's their history also. So they wouldn't have visited Jal Mahal for a generation because it was lying in a sewage dump. But even the royal family hadn't visited Jal Mahal because it was always a sewage dump. Since Jai Singh probably left, they started dumping sewage. But I think it is very important to communicate and not assume that inko kya pata, they don't have good taste and they're not educated. They are, and they are a stakeholder. I mean, what gives us the right to think that they're not worthy of communicating what you're doing in their landscape, in their house, in their home? So you have to carry people along, and of course there will be resistance to change. There always is a resistance ki ye pata nahi ab kya bana rahe hai. And the resistance, the core of the resistance is to do with whether their own resources are being depleted and they're somebody trying to hoodwink them and or steal their stuff and all that. And so they're very anxious and conscious. So when you bring them to the site, you explain what they're doing. So one of the things that people living around them thought that we're going to take off the old trees on the garden. So when you see, you've got a picture of Jal Mahal on your poster. So you see these old trees which are very old. So people for generations have looked at Jal Mahal and with those trees. So actually we wanted to get rid of those trees and plant new ones, and we didn't, because the whole visual imagery for people would have changed. So all the stamps has Jal Mahal with those trees. So of course you have to respect what and you have to carry people with you. You can't say नहीं इनका तो कोई taste नहीं है. फिर आप बताओ क्या कर रहे हो? You have to, थोड़ा सा time ज़्यादा लगता है, मेहनत ज़्यादा, but you have to carry people.
Well, in my case, it's the other way around. I want that these people carry me along because, when I stepped into architecture, I've actually learned my architecture, especially building technology and architectural art on site. It was, this kind of thing was never taught in schools. So I would say my education started there. I actually did. For instance, I'll tell you, I'm still looking for people because fortunately I'm from a generation when these people were still there. Now, some of these craftsmen are becoming extinct. So we were doing a project in Sikkim where we wanted to do Araish plaster. So it was a difficult task for us. We did a lot of research. We understood the whole thing. But getting people to do it was a very difficult thing. There are very few people left. There are, but there are very few people left. We put together a team of about 50 people and got that thing done on Shiv Murti, uske upar Araish ka plaster kiya hua and all that. So the thing is that no matter how much research you do, it is on the side that you're going to learn because, for instance, whether it is water or whether it is Araish plaster, the recipes keep changing from place to place. What they use in Rajasthan will be different from what they use in Chennai, will be different from what they use in Rome. So basically, these are the local people from whom you are going to learn. And it's becoming more and more difficult because that whole breed is becoming extinct.
But Saurabh, this is a dilemma because for example, in the Sona Kund, which is a sulfur spring, and a lot of stuff has been kind of pulled down, and there is neon green paint and bathroom tiles stuck, and we asked the community, "Abhi ye kya kar rahe ho aap? Why don't you use old material?" And they say कि नया लग रहा है. I mean, what's wrong with this? We'll put tiles, bathroom tiles, and it gives us. So who are we to say you stay in mud houses, and while we are in our air conditioned flats, but आप अपने mud house में ही रहो, let the roof leak, and because we have to upgrade everything. We can't speak from our, as you mentioned before, Saurabh, that we can't speak from our cocoons. To tell people what they should do, but it has to be a kind of a community effort.
And Mridul sir, you were referring to Shramdan while you were, so to both of you, do you see this concept of Shramdan coming in as part of the whole package, which will be helping the whole project? Shramdan in sense.
Definitely, there's no doubt about it. It is because of the Shramdan that we are able to do. I mean, of course, there are people who you pay for specialized job. For instance, cleaning of these water bodies. We really don't have to engage people to do it. There are people who are going to voluntarily come and do it. It's happening in our kind of our part of the country. It is happening. People
yes. So.
And I think one of the ways of getting Shramdan into education, I think community service should be brought back into education as part of something that everybody does. As architects or students, they should go and build, sort out a slum or, redevelop something in the community for the community. And I think that will also connect the students with the community. And we are really thinking of doing that quite seriously.
Ma'am, your that Gurgaon project, the bazaar that the restoration is going on, if anyone wish to join hands and do a Shramdan or any kind of activity, how do they do? How do they approach you?
Start cleaning with us. So the municipal corporation and GMDA, we've got a very enlightened leader there at the moment, Mr. Vinay Pratap, and he's leading the whole team, and we are pedestrianizing the whole stretch. It's not, but this is really a Chandni Chowk moment of Gurgaon. So it's not a big bazaar, but it's a small bazaar, and we're pedestrianizing. We're also trying to make sure that nobody is displaced, and we're trying to make sure that cars are not going to be used, and what we would want from people to join hands and create awareness with people. And also I think we need to be a bit more responsible when we visit places as tourists. We should not visit as chalo wahan pe kuch kha ke aate aur fir wahan pe phang denge aur engage with people. I think it is important that you engage with people, engage with the intangible stuff that is going on with the heritage or with the community. Engage with the community when you visit places, and just don't go and see and come back. And I think that will make a lot of difference. Sometimes what happens is, if somebody praises you from outside, kitna acha kaam kar, you feel good about it. If your family members keep saying you're doing very well, you hardly pay attention. But if somebody from outside comes and says, "Arey, you're doing very well," so you feel motivated. That's what we need, from tourists who come to engage with community and boost their confidence, boost their motivation. I think that will be very useful.
I think one thing that we have to understand the impact of social media. So with both of you, I think the generation that we represent is more active there. And if something can be put up in social media and kind of hard work being put by you guys and your team, that is being shown into the social media, so that more awareness in that sense, because half of the generation, our generation are glued to the social media, what's happening and how the scrolling thing is happening, what kind of effort is being made. Because my Dead River project started with social media, and unfortunately I get connected with these people through Shramdam, that you're saying that we do river cleanups, we do a lot of activities that involve community partnership and participation. So social media plays a very big role. I would suggest, the kind of activity you guys are doing, please come up with social media interface, so that people who wish to join, people who wish to see the work and contribute and be a part of it should come forward to you guys. that's a channel that is open, that should be utilized, to my an understanding, that let more people come in. More energies will add definite boost to the work that you guys are doing. The next generation which is waiting or which is open to learning, because I understand with the kind of youngsters I work on, they're so talented, they have so many questions and suggestions. I think that will be adding value to the work, the hard work you guys are putting in.
Certainly.
Definitely. I think we have a lot of information on social media. I think what we also have to learn how to navigate this information overload that
Yes.
happens, and interesting interesting solutions are coming in, that interesting rooms that will actually replace the television channels.
Yeah.
Are going to get formulated within the social media, so that if you're interested in heritage, you stay in that room, and everything about heritage is found on that room. So a lot of I think this is an evolving space. Everything is so. Yeah.
And I think once this live session goes recorded and go to the Facebook and Instagram crowd, I think they would going to love it, because there's a lot of audience waiting to be a part of such kind of amazing initiatives you both are doing.
So we've already started it.
I will tell the audience not to wait, but go out and start doing from your home, from your neighborhood, from your community. I'm sure there is something you can do on a daily basis. That's all.
Okay. Is that it, Saurabh?
Well, your coming indicates that's it.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Yes,
I wish I could give more time and we could do a lot more discussion. But I think we just touched the tip of the iceberg on the topic, and many more miles to go for documenting, for restoring, for disseminating to people through social media, through our talks and Sahapedia. So thank you for at least taking out time and talking to us, talking to our audience, giving so much information and also motivation to join in your efforts that you are doing. I would like to thank all of you. Thank you so much for coming in today. I would thank all the audience members also to making this panel very interesting with your questions and your presence as well. And lastly, a big thank you to Royal Rajasthan Foundation for supporting this panel discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was great. Thank you.
You.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.